RWBY is a show. The show is a Rooster Teeth creation that started in 2013, and it's got some mixed reviews. Partially because the show has things that are actually questionable, and partially because people want an excuse to hate on teenage girls. I've started the lengthy process of rewatching the entire show, but I'm not ready to make a video on it yet. Thankfully, the show has become big enough to spawn a few really cool fan creations. One of those creations was RWBY Grimm Eclipse. The game started as a solo project fan game hack and slash by Jordan Scott, but was promptly picked up by Rooster Teeth and turned into a full-fledged game set in the universe of the show. I could be really pedantic and spend this whole video critiquing the game based on its relationship with the show, and I could be equally weird by not taking this game at face value because of the nostalgia I hold for RWBY as a show, but today I'm going to try and be sensible. We're going to play through the entirety of this game together, looking at its story, gameplay, and design, and come to conclusions about the game's real value as a standalone game separate from the RWBY series. Because, though I may be unable to for the show, by the end of this video, I'll give RWBY Grimm Eclipse one word to sum it all up. Let's begin. The game starts by throwing us right into action. We choose from one of the four main characters, and we immediately begin investigating a forest that a professor told us to go to with a suspicious amount of Grimm, the canonically evil enemies from the show, and we gotta kill them. I started by using Weiss, whose fighting style is fairly slow when compared to the characters that we'll play later. As for the gameplay, it's pretty standard for the fair hack and slash gameplay. We have a fast single attack, a chargeable secondary attack, a gunfire, an ultimate, and a few combo and special moves that present themselves when you hit enough enemies. The feature list for this game is fairly small in terms of fighting mechanics, and that's kind of a big problem, but it makes a lot more sense to explain it when we actually play more characters, so let's save it for now. Outside of the fighting mechanics, the game also does HP in an interesting manner. The show has a concept called aura, which is like a manifestation of your soul or something. It's basically a force field that stops the characters from immediately dying, and it recharges after some time. They've introduced that concept into the game by basically making your HP bar tiny, but with a really fast recharge. I kind of grew to like this HP system, because whenever your aura reached 0 and you could actually die, the game became really intense, forcing you to play really conservatively. One thing that's fairly apparent from the first level is the visuals of the game. The character animations and models are fluid and look good, but the environmental details are very limited, especially so in areas that we don't explicitly go to. This pathway is a decent example. Is this horrible level design? No. But it's weird that we stay all the way out to the skyblocks. As I've said in videos before this, I actually don't care too much about the graphics of the games I play as long as the gameplay is fun, which it is for the moment, so we'll move on. We stop 4 waves of Grimm from attacking this command center with strange markings on it in a cave, and move on to the next level. For this level I decided to use RWBY, who's the main protagonist of the show, who's a little faster, but there's really not that much of a distinction between her and Weiss. Oh well. We go through even more of the forest, taking down waves of Grimm in the process again. One thing that hack and slash games have to work really hard to get right is their audio, because the games are about constant action, so having repetitive sound effects or boring audio would make the experience annoying. Did this game treat their audio right? The music of this game is ripped straight from the show, and I personally happen to love the show's OST, so there's no complaints there. I also vaguely remember the audio balancing in this game being terrible in the past, but it's definitely improved to a point where I don't really care anymore. It's only noticeably bad in dialogue. What was that? The main problem, like many other hack and slash games, is the sound effects. They seem to realize that they needed to make the primary attack have unique sounds, but they didn't put that same care into the secondary fire, so anytime you use it, you hear a "ah," which was so grating. That is not what sound they make. Especially because certain waves are easy enough to one-shot kill with the secondary fire alone, so you just hear that sound a million times in a row. Playing this game on mute is not a bad idea. Its balancing may have improved, but the sound effects are still trash. Just listen to the OST while you play, it's basically the same thing. We discover some cages set up to trap Grimm with the markings of Merlot Industries on them. Our professors give us exposition on Dr. Merlot, the one who set up the now defunct company, and he's basically just a researcher who supposedly died when his company's town and building was run over by Grimm. Intriguing. We move on to the next level, so I move on to the next character, Blake. Blake is kind of the same as all the other characters. She's a little faster though, which makes her the most fun character to play so far. Maybe the last character, Yang, will save us in the next level with some actually unique fighting mechanics, but for now we have to play this one. This level has us visit the aforementioned destroyed town to investigate the old research center for clues. We navigate through the level and beat more enemies. At this exact moment the game started to feel repetitive for me. Every level in this game essentially becomes follow the predetermined path, kill some Grimm. Follow the predetermined path, kill some Grimm in waves. It all felt pretty samey to me after a certain point. Regardless, we make it to the abandoned Merlot facility, but it explodes, so we move on. I play this next level with Yang, and it's not even worth going into her. Let's look at the right clicks of every character side by side. They're basically the same. Now let's look at the ults. They're all just big damage in a radius. I mentioned earlier that the game's feature list was small, but I don't think that's actually the problem. The real problem is that they've set up every character to be practically exactly the same, which poses two issues. One, there's no variety in fighting style, and so you're limited in how much playtime you can really sink into the game. And two, the game doesn't actually match the fighting style from the show because of their lack of personalization. Imagine if RWBY's ult had something to do with their ability to practically teleport in the show, and wasn't just a big, haha, damage in a circle like everybody else's was. For a hack and slash game, you need the fighting to have variation, and this game just doesn't have that. Either way, we trudge forward, moving a bomb we found in a cave along train tracks to a hole so that we don't die. While doing this, we notice a mutated Grimm. Who could be doing that? Let's find out. The next level can only be described as filler. We do literally nothing important except kill some Grimm, which is especially annoying because every level is starting to kind of feel like filler from a gameplay perspective. Like I said before, every level is comprised of just moving from one kill zone to the next. There's not even like Grimm that spawn in between areas as you traverse them. You just kill a bunch in one area then move to the next. I'm not saying this game has to be open world, but its ultra-linear level design is just trash. The story finally picks up a little bit in the next few levels though. Apparently Merlot Industries is using a temple to store and do experiments on Grimm, but it's already been abandoned, so we go to a ship dock nearby and get on a ship which takes us to Merlot's island, which has new mobs that look nothing like Grimm. This island has communication jammers on it though, so we can't speak to our professors. We promptly disable 3 of the jammers on the island and our feed gets intercepted by the still alive Dr. Merlot. We learn over the next little while that he was in part responsible for the town being attacked, and, in villain fashion, feels no remorse and thinks that the value his research company gained from those deaths was actually good. Thankfully, we're reaching ever close to his facility thanks to his conveniently set up green serum pipe system, so we can finally take him down. In his facility, we break a bunch of his shit, deal with some very hard environmental traps. Seriously, was this their best idea of making maps more interesting? And reach his lair. Instead of fighting him though, we fight his mutated Deathstalker, a mob from the show. This is the only actual boss fight of the game in my books, and it's pretty okay. I haven't spoken much of the difficulty of this game thus far, and mostly because it's pretty much exactly where it needs to be. The difficulty, of course, ramps up towards the end with the new mobs and this boss, but it all seems like pretty natural progression to me. This boss does, on some level, seem to indicate to me that the game was intended for multiplayer though, because making the most powerful mobs in the game spawn infinitely in the middle of a boss fight was the most annoying choice they could have made. The main strategy with this boss is basically just to spam your gun at him until his little stinger gets stuck in the ground, and you get to do massive damage by attacking it. A few cycles of doing that, and you've beaten the boss. Dr. Merlot tries to explode the facility with you inside it, but fails to do so, killing himself and leaving you victorious. I guess I'll wrap up my thoughts about the story before I let the credits roll. The creators were in a tough spot with this game, because it takes place between 2 actual seasons of the show. Spoiling the show wasn't an option, so they were probably a little limited in what they could do, so I'm actually kind of okay with what the end result ended up being, relatively speaking. The story of discovering, following, and taking down an evil man will always be fine for a story, but I just have one problem. We never actually fight Dr. Merlot. I think the last level of the game bears great resemblance to Portal. It was probably what they were aiming for. In Portal, you don't end the game by fighting GLaDOS through proxy. You fight GLaDOS. It was a weird choice that probably stemmed from a little bit of laziness on their part, and it kinda made the story feel unimpactful by the end. Alright, let's let the credits roll now. If we take a look at RWBY Grimm Eclipse from the perspective of a standalone game with no relation to any show of any kind, there's unfortunately really only one word to describe it. Pretty darn bad. I think the game itself has a lot of things I could nitpick, but at its most basic level, the fighting gets boring because there's no variety, the level design is too linear and repetitive, and the game doesn't get saved by great graphics. It's just not good. But here's where I flip the script. This game is bad when looked at as a standalone game, but it isn't one. It's a RWBY game. As much as I critique the show, I fucking love RWBY. The existence of this game is super exciting and exhilarating to people who are fans of the show, and I don't think that it's actually fair to completely ignore that. This game has a lot of value, just not to the general population. In many ways, I think of RWBY Grimm Eclipse in the same way that I think of RWBY. It's got a lot of inescapable flaws, but sometimes the game just allures you. It feels weird to spend 10 minutes critiquing the game than saying this, but I love RWBY Grimm Eclipse. From its awkward dialogue to its awesome depictions of the main characters from a show I love a lot of this game. I don't think it's impossible to love bad games, and this is one bad game I'll hold close to my heart for a long time. Thanks for watching.